deserve it. No, I don't deserve it.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
6 o'clock Central African time it is. A very good morning to you. Welcome to Rise and Shine. It is Tuesday, the 25th of November. Yeah, I think the Christmas trees are coming up now, hey, in the houses. Have you put yours up?
Not yet. And I'm going to get it done, actually. And I think this weekend's a good time. Although normally, in our family, we wait until December. There's something about the beginning of December that really gets us kind of, it's Christmas, it's happening. So next week probably. All right. Well, he's Peter Ndoro. I'm Asanda Beda. Thank you so much for joining us. No, Christmas is quite a thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. We'll chat about it during the show. Coming up on the program though today, we're going to be taking a look at a couple of things. One of the things is President Lula visiting Mozambique. He was at the G20 summit, you might have seen, and being close by, he went to Mozambique, and that's of course a Lusophone country, as is Brazil, so that makes sense, I guess. Did you know that there are 5 Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, and that's the most anywhere on the world? Yeah, just the fascinating fact that you don't need to do anything with.
Right. And also Gambia says it is temporarily hosting Cameroonian opposition leader Issa Chiroma Bakari on humanitarian grounds. All those stories and more coming up. Get in touch with us at Channel Africa 1. We'd love to hear your views and questions around our programming. That handle is across all social media platforms, and that's where we live stream via YouTube.
But first, it's time to find out what's happening in the world of news. And it's Chanduko Lugege we say good morning to.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. South Africa's handover of the G20 presidency to the United States, scheduled for today, will be a low-key event. The G20 summit closed in Johannesburg on Sunday without a ceremonial handover to the US, its next chair, after Washington boycotted the summit. The Sherpa of South Africa's G20 presidency and Director General of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Zane Dango, says it will probably be done by a senior official from DIRCO to a US diplomatic representative at the department's offices in Pretoria. The leading challenger in Guinea-Bissau's presidential election, Fernando Diaz and President Umaro Sissoco Embalo's camp, have both declared victory before the release of official results, each claiming over half of the vote. The dueling assertions risk escalating strife in the coup-prone West African country after Sunday's vote, in which the party that led the fight for independence from Portugal was excluded for the first time. Instead, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde threw its support behind Diaz. The head of South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority, Shamila Batohi, has told the Nkabinde inquiry in Pretoria that she relied on expert advice when approaching President Cyril Ramaphosa about advocate Andrew Chauke. Batohi has submitted the inquiry email exchanges between advocates Simphiwe Mlocha and the embattled Chauke. They allegedly expose a dispute over the signing of Major General Johan Boyson's racketeering indictment without supporting evidence. Boyson, who led the Cato Manor unit between 2008 and 2011, was arrested alongside unit members on serious charges including racketeering. Batohi is the main witness in the inquiry to determine Chauke's fitness to hold office, which began last week.
But that supplementary opinion, in my view, is almost like a forensic analysis of the evidence, because together with his opinion, he provided me a bundle of evidence. And my decision to recommend to the president was based primarily on the evidence that was provided to me, attached or forwarded as annexures to Dr. Broughton's opinion. I want to be clear about that because the others were opinions that I considered, but when I made the decision, I looked at the documents, many of which we are presenting now. Some of that may not be presented, but I will speak to council about the entire bundle being handed in as evidence because that is what I based my decision on.
As South Africa observes the start of 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children today, civil society movements say there's a need to be a clear plan of action, preventative measures and strategies amid gender-based violence and femicide being classified a national disaster. Government officially classified GBVF a national disaster last week following growing protests. Although some activists have questioned the timing of the announcement, others are happy about the declaration. The movement believes healthcare systems and facilities will need to be funded. Some activists believe a change of behavior is also required.
So you cannot take it back. Now it's enough of we are a national crisis, we are speaking, now it's time for action.
The existing national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide that was drafted in 2019 needs to be revisited. So since the plan was drafted, we have surely seen an increased number of women and children being violated, murdered, abused, raped.
The U.S. designation of the Venezuelan cartel de las Soles as a foreign terrorist organization has come into force. This as Washington ramps up pressure on President Nicolas Maduro. The BBC's Mimi Swabi has the story.
As Venezuelans anxiously await a supposed new phase of Washington's Operation Southern Spear, the designation of Cartel de los Soles grants the U.S. more legal power in what it insists is a fight against drugs. The Trump administration accuses the cartel of trafficking and says it's headed by President Nicolas Maduro and his officials. Venezuela's government has rejected what it called a ridiculous plan to designate a non-existent group. It says Washington's true motive is regime change. US pressure has been mounting, heightened by the arrival of the world's largest warship to the South Caribbean.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Bafana head coach Hugo Broos has announced his provisional AFCON squad. Marco Jansen rips through India as Proteas continue to boss second test. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Now, every day after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you something that we call the Africa Roundup. And essentially what it is a look at the news and events that took place in the last 24 hours. And we bring them to you in a concise format to make sure that you don't miss out on anything. And it helps set up the news day that's ahead. And we begin the Africa Roundup today with this story. Fernando Diaz, the leading challenger in Guinea-Bissau's presidential election held last Sunday, has declared victory, saying that he secured more than 50% of the vote. He claims his claims come ahead of official results, raising concerns of political tension in the small West African nation, which has a history of instability. Blanche Ancla reports.
Voters queued patiently, clutching their voting cards at polling stations, as Guinea-Bissau held its presidential and legislative elections on Sunday. Residents were hoping for change, stability, and development in the politically volatile West African nation. In this election, Embalo is in a tight contest to become the first leader in 3 decades to win a second consecutive term. He echoed voters' sentiments as he cast his vote on Sunday.
I call on everyone to vote massively, to elect a person who will bring stability and progress to Guinea-Bissau, to build this country.
He faces 11 other candidates, the strongest being Fernando Diaz, a relative political newcomer backed by the party that led the fight for independence from Portugal in the 1960s and 1970s. Ahead of the elections, Diaz vowed to tackle drug trafficking in the nation, a key transit point for cocaine traveling from South America to Europe.
How is it possible for a drug plane to take off in Guinea-Bissau at the airport and the president says he has no knowledge of it? We also think that, being aware of this, we will fight against drug trafficking in Guinea-Bissau, especially when it's coming from public authorities.
Gambia says it is temporarily hosting Cameroonian opposition leader Issa Chiroma Bakari on humanitarian grounds. This follows last month's contested presidential election in Cameroon, which sparked deadly protests. Incumbent Paul Biya was declared the winner with 53.7% of the vote, while Chiroma received 35.2%. Tensions flared even before official results were announced, as early returns suggested Biya, in power since 1982, would secure an eighth term.
I was deeply saddened to learn of the kidnappings of priests.
So now Pope Leo has called for the immediate release of children and staff abducted last week from a Catholic school in Nigeria. Gunmen seized students and teachers from St. Mary's School in the northwest, and the attack comes amid a wave of school abductions last week, prompting the government to close 47 colleges.
South Africa has signed a memorandum of understanding with the New Development Bank to help boost the country's economy. The bank, which has already invested around $1 billion in energy projects with power utility Eskom and other development institutions, plans to expand its investment in South Africa. Ashwani Muto, Director General of the bank's Independent Evaluation Office, has more.
We'll be assessing the cooperation, the partnership, the investments over the past decade. And this requires a very comprehensive evaluation of the entire portfolio of projects, more than $5 billion we're talking about. And this will entail site visits, interaction with government institutions, private sector, stakeholders, academia, and others. While NDB has funded a large part of projects in South Africa in energy, our general strategy does prioritize also investments in other areas, including infrastructure, transport, digital infrastructure, natural resources and environment sustainability. So there are also other sectors, and we have a new Director General of our regional office here in Johannesburg for the NDB, and now she's looking at scaling up the pipeline of projects and portfolio.
And finally, the social media platform Meta has ended internal research into the mental health impact of Facebook after uncovering evidence that its products can harm users, according to unredacted court filings in the US school district's lawsuit against the company and other social media platforms. Ciara Lee reports.
Meta documents obtained through discovery showed in a 2020 research project codenamed Project Mercury, the company's scientists worked with survey firm Nielsen and reportedly studied the effect of deactivating Facebook. Internal documents showed people who stopped using Facebook for a week reported lower feelings of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and social comparison. Rather than publishing those findings or pursuing additional research, the filing states Meta called off further work and internally declared that the negative study findings were tainted by, quote, existing media narrative around the company. According to the filing, one staffer insisted the conclusions of the research were valid. The filing alleges Meta told Congress that it had no ability to quantify whether its products were harmful to teenage girls.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us, though. Coming up shortly, Asanda takes us to East Africa, where we talk to our resident analyst there, to unpack some of the big stories that are playing out in East Africa. That's with Dennis Beru.
Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
The story that takes us to Zambia. There are two men actually that were sentenced to prison for the plot to kill the president with witchcraft. You go like, what? So these guys were arrested actually in Lusaka, and what was found on them was a live chameleon. Can you believe that? Animal tails and bottles of concoction. That law takes us back to 1914, which is the Witchcraft Act. I can imagine now arrested and they go to jail for the next 2 years. You know, I presume that when you get to jail, they get to ask you actually, what is it that you committed? Now, this is the first of its kind, by the way, for somebody to be arrested for such. They in Pemba, whenever they pass. Hey, Chikanga, hey, Uloya, hey, Mulosi. And imagine here I am in these early hours of the mornings, I get to talk about witchcraft.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now we delve deeper into the East African region in terms of what's making news in and around this particular region of our continent, and we get analysis and comments from our East Africa analyst Dennis Mberu, who is a journalist and team lead at Grassroots Journalism. Dennis, good morning to you on this Tuesday, the 25th of November. The year has gone by, it's done.
We are almost, winding up 2025. Hope you are well in South Africa.
Well, thanks, and we hope you are as well in Nairobi.
Yeah, sure.
So today, let's start with Ethiopia. The country has taken a step towards building one of the region's largest railway training centers. Let's talk about that in terms of why Ethiopia is best suited for this kind of project, and what will this mean for railway and infrastructure development in the country?
Asanda, of course, the Bishoftu-based facility sprawling across 62 is envisioned as the backbone of Ethiopia's long-term strategy to build a fully localized, technically skilled workforce capable of operating and, of course, maintaining and expanding one of the continent's the most ambitious rail networks. Of course, according to the Ethiopia Railway communique, of course, they said the center will be completed within 3 years. And Lina Balecheu, now the Chief Executive Officer of the ERC, described the project as a pivotal investment in the country's human capital. Of course, he also noted that Ethiopia has reached an inflection point where expanding the railway infrastructure must be matched by a comparable growth in domestic technical capability. And of course, our emphasis on reducing reliance on foreign technicians align with the broader national policy. And to the Ministry of Transport and Logistics, Alemu and will provide efficient transportation services and modern railway infrastructure to connect the country's major development center and all neighboring countries. And Ethiopia, of course, they heavily depend on overseas experts as long-term inflated operational cost slowed the pace for the localization. And of course, as under the facility is expected to significantly cut training-related expenses, of course, stimulate.
And as you say, this is in efforts to make the workforce more localized. And I guess that also reduces the dependence then on international or outside technicians in terms of this particular railway project. What will it mean then for local employment, though? Can it directly translate into that rising for the country of Ethiopia?
Yeah, of course, they are looking at a project employing the Ethiopians, and of course, it is said that around 1,840 Ethiopians have already been trained and certified maintenance and safety management, and of course, that means that over 2,840 Ethiopians have been employed, and of course, creating some job. Of course, by early 2024, the surpassed 3,000 roles such as trade, electrical engineers, of course, the mid to junior level managers. And of course, you can see this is something that, of course, it is to create employment opportunities for the Ethiopians.
So let's move to Uganda now. Uganda and Kenya, the presidents there, President Museveni and his Kenyan counterpart, William Ruto, they've met in Toronto to discuss trade between the two countries. This also has to do with rail infrastructure. What do we know here?
Yeah. President William Ruto and Ugandan counterpart, Yoweri Museveni, of course, they met at a Devki company, and of course, they spoke about the construction of the standard gauge railway extension from Naivasha to Kampala and onwards to Rwanda and to the border of the Democratic of Congo. And of course, speaking in Osikuru, on Uganda on Sunday during the groundbreaking of the Devki Mega steel project, President Museveni, President Ruto said that the extension of SGR will be a major joint venture between Kenya and Uganda, with of course, the formal launch set for January 2026. And of course, this is just an extension of the Kenya, the Naivasha to Kampala railway, which will now connect with the Malaba Kampala line and later to the DRC. And of course, Ruto said that will also jointly extend the petroleum pipeline to Rwanda and DR Congo as part of the efforts to economic because as of the government of Kenya is devastating, the investing around 60% of its shareholding in Kenya Pipeline, and of course through the Nairobi Securities Exchange. President, of course, encouraged the public and the private investors across East Africa to take up the shares. Of course, he also added that Uganda recently ratified a new cooperation, of course, during the joint ministerial meeting in Nairobi for the joint ownership of the pipeline infrastructure. And of course, Ruto also noted that the regional projects such as the petroleum, SGR, and the dwelling of the Rironi Nakuru to Malaba are designed to enhance connectivity between the coast and, of course, the ongoing Kenya to Uganda infrastructure. And of course, people see these as an opportunity for the East African nation to connect to its the coastline of East Africa.
All right. Also in Canada, this time in Ottawa, the capital, there was a meeting there of civic groups, and they were meeting around the crisis in Sudan. What emerged as major points?
Yeah, of course, these are civil group which hold, the news conference, and of course the representative from the number of civic and community groups hold a conference in Ottawa, in Canada, of course, to discuss the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. And speaking to the reporters, now Ahmad El Khad, the National Council of the Canadian Muslim, Ismail Adam, Darfur Association of Canada, and of course, we had Momona San, the Sudanese Canadian Community Association. Of course, their conversation was centralized at, of course, the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Sudan, where, of course, now women and children now feeling the brunt of the ongoing crisis between the national forces and, of course, the national the RSF. And of course, in the news conference, they really focused on the, of course, coming in and ensuring that, of course, because they protect, the women and girls, and we've seen so many children, women being killed in the ongoing war.
Dennis, you faded a bit there. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Dennis, you faded a bit there. Are you there? Can you? Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. That's better. Please continue.
Yeah. So also the peace negotiation. There is an end to what they termed as the genocide that is still happening in Darfur and the entire Sudan, and of course the key players in the war. Of course, the UAE was mentioned in the conference, and there is need for the players, the likes of the Canadian, to come in and to ensure that of course, there is an end to the war in Sudan.
Staying with Sudan, the Sudanese Armed Forces head or Sudan Army Chief has rejected another siege plan that's been put forward by the Quad, saying that the United Arab Emirates' involvement with the Quad is biased. On what grounds does he say this?
The armed forces rejected the ceasefire, a plan presented Arab Emirates involvement in the Quad is biased, and the proposed aims to eliminate the army. Of course, the accusation of arming and funding the RSF. And in March, I remember Asanda, it slammed the Sudanese move to file a case against it in the International Court Justice, calling it the charges as a cynical publicity stand. Of course, Abdel Fattah el-Burhan told the senior officials in an address released by his office late on Sunday that the proposal put forward this month by the Quad, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, and the US effectively eliminate the existence of the armed forces and, of course, the dissolution of all security agencies, while it maintain as the rebellious militia in its position. Of course, and in a response on Monday, Asanda, the UAE Minister of the State for the International Cooperation, Rahim bin Ibrahim al-Shami, accused al-Bahan of consistently obstructive behavior. And one more move, the General Bahan refuses peace over tours. And of course, his rejection of the U.S. Sudan, as refusal to accept a ceasefire. And of course, he demonstrates constant obstructive behavior. This is according to El Hashimi. And of course, El Fatah sees as leaning on the other side, that is the RSF side, and of course, there are obvious a point to view this as that. Of course, he is not willing to have a conversation on ending the war in Sudan.
Right, so Dennis, we're going to leave it there for today. Thanks again for joining us and giving us your insights.
Thank you so much, Asanda.
Dennis Beru, journalist and team lead at Grassroots Journalism. We had a bit of some signal issues there, but I think we managed to get the gist of what he needed to say. Coming up still, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women is observed on this day. It's the 25th of November. We call it colloquially, or in abbreviated terms, 16 Days of Activism here in South Africa. So that's coming up later in terms of that chat. Right now, though, let's get our news headlines at 6:30 Central African Time. Good morning, Jalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, South Africa's handover of the G20 presidency to the United States, scheduled for today, will be a low-key event. The leading challenger in Guinea-Bissau's presidential election, Fernando Diaz, and President Umaro Sissoco Embalo's camp have both declared victory before the release of official results, each claiming over half of the vote. And finally, Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have announced a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire with the Sudanese army. It comes a day after the army dismissed a truce proposal from international mediators, saying it favoured the RSF. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's find out what's been happening in the world of sport. And on the sports desk this morning, Fikile Lingwati. And Fikile, I'm not going to mention what happened last night. Manchester United at home losing 1-0 to Everton. I know. Fikile Lingwati, take the sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
I will start off with football news, Peter, and start and say Hugo Broos, the head coach of South Africa's men's football team, named a 54-man preliminary squad for the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations finals in Morocco. Broos will narrow down the squad to 23 players in early December for the competition, which will take place from the 21st of December to the 18th of January. Mamelodi Sundowns veteran forward Themba Zwane has made the preliminary squad, with Broos seeming still hoping he can prove his form and fitness. Wydad Casablanca's in-form attacker Thembiko Ziloj is not in the squad, despite calls for his inclusion after a fine start to the season with the Moroccan Giants. Orlando Pirates have the most players in Broos' squad, 12, followed by Mamelodi Sundowns, 10. Kaizer Chiefs left back Bradley Cross and attacking midfielder Mduduzi Shabalala are both also in the preliminary squad. Former South Africa's Proteas women captain Danae van Niekerk is the headline inclusion in the squad announced for the Ireland White Ball Series, marking a first national team call-up since 2021. Van Niekerk only recently reversed her international retirement and was expected to be slowly reintegrated into the team ahead of next year's T20 World Cup in England. Coach Mandla Mashimbi explained that the 32-year-old has deserved the call-up with impressive performances on the domestic front.
She's been quite consistent the last 2 seasons. Last season she scored runs and she started well this season as well. So I think it would be a no-brainer not to pick a player who is in such good form. Obviously, her name comes with a lot of previous stuff in terms of her being captain and having done well for the team before. But I think she has earned a call-up based on the performances that she's put the last 2 seasons.
Marco Jansen delivered a masterclass in fast bowling to take 6 for 48 and propel India to a meager 201 all-out in reply to South Africa's 489 all-out on the third day of the second test at the Basapara Stadium in Guwahati. The Tories sensibly opted not to enforce the follow-on and battled again, adding 26 without loss to their huge first innings. That's a lead of 288 runs for an overall lead of 314 runs, and with 2 days still to play, appear to be heading for a victory which would give them a 2-0 series win following their 30-run victory in the first test at Eden Gardens last week. And finally, with motor racing, Lewis Hamilton said he's not looking forward to the 2026 Formula One season after a difficult year continued with a tough Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend. Britain's 7-time world champion qualified last for the race, the first time that it had happened on pure pace in his 19-year F1 career. The Ferrari driver swiftly worked his way up the field to get into the points position, but he could not overtake the Sauber of Nico Hülkenberg on the medium tyre in the closing stages of the race. Having finished 10th, Hamilton's classification was later moved up to 8th by virtue of the McLarens of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri being disqualified for the technical infringement. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel African Perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And now to check in with the world of business for the first time this Tuesday, let's say good morning to Tabiso Lehogu.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. Born of crisis but torn of years of tensions among its members, as the group of 20 major economies has scored a rare victory at the weekend for multilateralism. This after they overcame the boycott and objections of most powerful member, the United States. South Africa, this year's G20 president, rallied all but 2 member nations, the US and Argentina, to issue a declaration ignoring Washington's warnings and quelling questions about the G20's future. The White House accused South Africa of weaponizing its presidency to undermine the G20's founding principles on unanimous consensus. It said US President Donald Trump would restore its legitimacy while hosting next year. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa says power utility Eskom workers must be fairly compensated for keeping the power utility running as wage talks resume today. Unions are pushing for a 15% increase after last week's opening meeting on the bargaining framework. This as Eskom continues to face pressure over wages and financial stability. Spokesperson Phakamile Hlubimachol.
If you look at Eskom's overall performance, they have finally made a profit margin of over 16 billion. And of course, that kind of turnover, that kind of performance, the fact that Eskom, as we speak right now, has gone over 600 days without load shedding, that it has an energy availability factor of over 90%. All of that can be attributed to the hard work of workers who are negotiating right now in this forum with the employer.
Meanwhile, employees of the Free State Province Gambling, Liquor and Tourism Authorities in South Africa have embarked on an indefinite strike outside the provincial headquarters in Bloemfontein. This after they lodged a dispute with their employer over salary increases for 2024-2025 financial year. Provincial chairperson for the National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union, NAHAU, Hauhelo Mtlibisa, says there are outstanding salary increases. Mtlibisa has called on the Premier to rescue the entity.
Well, we're demanding 5% in a form of a salary scale for those that are earning over 600 downwards, at least 5%, and 2.5 for 600,000 upwards. That was our initial demand as the union in this regard. And we're saying that we will call upon the Premier of this province to rescue this entity.
The European Investment Bank is pledging more than $2.3 billion of financing for renewable energy projects on the African continent over the next 2 years. The project will include hydroelectric, solar and wind power plants, as well as the expansion and upgrading of infrastructure, transmission and distribution facilities. They will be backed by guarantees from the European Commission. The Swiss Broadcasting Corporation has announced that it will cut 900 jobs over the next 3 years as it strives to reduce costs amid upheavals in the media landscape. The layoff come as the government imposes budget cuts on the broadcaster. It operates channels in Switzerland's 4 national languages and says it needs to save $344 million by 2029. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 450, Botswana 13 pula 30, Kenya 128 shillings 66, and Zambia 22 kwacha 93. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5.40, Russia 79 rubles 3, India 89 rupees 60, China 71.10. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 36 cents, 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Gold is trading at $4,070, platinum $1,528 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $62.42 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hogo.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Be inspired. Stay informed. Channel Africa, the beauty of life. Now available anytime, anywhere with our new app.
South Africa's Tourism Minister, Patricia de Lille, says the Gauteng province has generated an estimated $58 million in visitor revenue from this past weekend's G20 events. The figure marks the province's early tourism gains as South Africa concludes its G20 presidency, or has concluded it. She says the strong turnout underscores Gauteng's growing appeal as a global meetings destination. Officials expect the final economic impact to be even higher once all sectors submit their reports. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Simusa has more.
More than 130 G20 meetings took place across South Africa, with the bulk of priority policy discussions hosted in Gauteng. The G20 adopted a declaration agreeing to address climate-related issues, strengthening disaster resilience and response, ensuring debt sustainability for low-income countries. According to Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille, tourism is part of the declaration.
Tourism is certainly part of the declaration. And again, all the G20 countries, we have committed ourselves to continue to work together, to innovate, to invest, to make sure that we improve air access, make travel seamlessly for our visitors, deal with the reforms in our visa regulations. So we will continue to work together. With the G20 summit for South Africa, tourism must be the biggest winner. Our hotels are overflowing from Soweto to Sandton. all over, and we have already also during the year more than 135 working group meetings and ministerial meetings. So the tourism sector is very happy.
The big question is what becomes of seasonal jobs, especially those in the hospitality industry.
We are also fortunately in the summer season that kicked off in September. So already a lot of those temporary jobs will stay at least until the end of the summer center. But that is why we have to do more to make sure that we absorb especially semi-skilled, unskilled young people, train them, keep them in the sector. Already just in the past 9 months, we've grown by more than 1 million tourists. And the more tourists come, the more jobs we can create.
Delil said arrivals from the United States have now surpassed inbound tourists from the United Kingdom.
More people from the US are coming. They are now ahead of the United Kingdom that has led that market for many years. We've seen an increase in the number of flights between Washington, New York, Cape Town and Johannesburg, and those flights are fully booked. In fact, they are looking for more frequencies. So as far as tourism is concerned, whatever happened in the geopolitical space had no impact in tourism. In fact, we've seen a positive spin-off.
Dr. Ntabiseng Muleko is an economist at the Stellenbosch Business School.
I think this is a pivotal moment. Firstly, this is the first G20 summit happening on the African continent. This is the first also for South Africa, hosting an economic international diplomacy engagement and cooperation of this nature. I think that significant is the investment flows, just direct tourism. I think besides the engagement in terms of the deliberations of the actual summit, but we've seen from the beginning of the year up until now, flights, hotel bookings, accommodation. The tourism sector is boosted and the value chain around that for catering, the use of our services, whether it's in the media space, people are active.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Right, it's 6:46 Central African time. Today, the 25th of November, marks the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, a day that's recognized globally to highlight one of the world's most widespread and persistent human rights violations. Almost 1 in 3 women will experience a physical or sexual violence in their lifetime, most often from someone they know. And it also marks the start of the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign. This year, the spotlight is on the growing threat of digital violence, from online harassment and hate speech to image-based abuse, doxing and cyberstalking, forms of violence that can spill over into real-life harm. In South Africa, UN Women says that digital violence is escalating at an alarming rate, risking decades of progress made towards gender equality. Well, to unpack this, we're now joined by Jennifer Asio, who's a program specialist for ending violence against women at UN Women South Africa. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for having me.
We are in the era of the digital space. Just how problematic are attacks against women online in this digital space?
Thank you so much, Peter. So digital violence against women and girls is becoming a growing and widely concerning issue. If you look at the statistics globally, approximately 1 in 3 women has actually experienced some form of online harassment or abuse, including threats and stalking or non-consensual sharing of images. And women in leadership and business and politics are particularly targeted by digital violence. And in the world of journalism, for your information, Peter, 1 in 4 women journalists globally have actually reported online threats of physical violence. And when you look at the African region, about 28% of women interviewed across countries like Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Senegal, and our own South Africa have experienced some form of online violence. And in South Africa alone, studies also show that nearly 40% of women who use the internet report having faced some form of online harassment, and young women and girls are particularly targeted.
I think you may have partly answered my next question. What are the most common forms of online abuse that women and girls are experiencing?
Digital violence actually has become an issue that spans every corner of the internet. And we have forms like cyber stalking, we have harassment, there's non consensual image sharing, which I mentioned earlier. There's also what we call the artificial intelligence generated deepfakes, and there is doxing as well, and gender disinformation.
What is doxing?
So doxing is the act of, publicly revealing or publishing private or personal information or identifying information about a person without their consent. And this information could include things like somebody's addresses, somebody's phone numbers, their financial details, or other data that is otherwise very sensitive and not meant for, public sharing without a person's consent.
Help us explain to our listeners why, because it's difficult sometimes to make that connection, why it's considered violence actually.
So digital violence is considered violence because what is important at this point, Peter, is to understand that perpetrators have gone behind the scenes from the physical space into the digital space to violate human rights. Digital violence is a violation of human rights, and it impacts the mental health of women. It limits their freedom of expression. It restricts women's full participation in digital and public life, and it pushes women to reduce their visibility or leave public life altogether to escape abuse. And these attacks also cause fear and reputational damage and economic harm and political silencing. So, in other words, it's violence because it is a violation of human rights. And in this case, it's a violation of women's human rights because it restricts their freedom of expression and movement and visibility.
Online violence is already bad enough, but have you seen cases where this escalates even further to physical threats or actual violence in the real world?
Yes, there are cases like that. And you don't even have to look very far because digital violence actually moves from online and then it finds its space into the homes of women, into schools, into the private lives of women. So whilst we are experiencing, or whilst women experience violence online, the same kind of violence actually translates into something else in the other spaces where women find themselves.
Who are you finding are the women most at risk? Is it public figures, activists, journalists you've mentioned, or any woman who simply uses the internet?
So most women who have access to the internet are actually at risk of online violence. But there are specific categories of women who are targeted, especially women who are in leadership, women who are in business, and women who are in politics, because those are the women who are in the public spaces. And remember, violence is also about, a fight for power. There's people wanting to dominate spaces and people wanting to exert their authority. So when women come out strong and when women practice their leadership, their business and politics, it presents a threat to certain categories of the population. So they target those women who are in the public spaces. But broadly, women and girls are actually most at risk of digital violence compared to their male counterparts.
Um, Legislation, I mean, we have things like the Cybercrimes Act, but I suppose one of the biggest challenges is you may have legislation, but enforcement becomes a big hurdle.
Mhm. That is correct, Peter. So I think our priorities as not just the South African government, but almost all the governments where we have digital legislation should be on closing those legal gaps, ensuring that survivors can access justice. We need to strengthen technology companies' accountability for a safe and equal digital environment and prevention. And platforms also have an important role to play because abuse spreads when abusive content is not removed quickly, when rules are unclear, and when reporting channels are weak. So there must be deliberate efforts to ensure that survivor services adapt, for example, to digital forms of harm. And programs that challenge toxic online cultures also need to be scaled up. Prevention also means that we need to help young people to understand and appreciate respectful behavior online, and also giving parents and schools and communities clear guidance on how to respond when abuse happens. And a safe digital world is only possible when prevention, education, and culture change work alongside these laws and real accountability. So laws alone are not enough, like you said, and it's a collective responsibility of all of us, all the stakeholders, to prevent digital violence.
I suppose another area that's quite important is education. This is a relatively new area of law, and I guess some people still struggle to understand that even in a WhatsApp group, if you pass on things that are in a private WhatsApp group onto other people, it's part of the violence and you're part of being a violator.
Yes. If you remember earlier, Peter, we mentioned, the different forms in which digital violence presents. And one of them is doxing. There's also the gender disinformation. So any information about an individual that you share without their consent is already digital violence because it has the propensity to cause harm to the person whose personal information you are sharing. And that's why you notice that a lot of social media platforms that are used responsibly will have regulations about do's and don'ts, and they have controls on what you can post on that platform or what you can actually remove from that platform and share elsewhere.
So this year's 16 Days of Activism campaign, what's the central message and what are some of the key actions people can take part in?
So I think one of the most important things there, Peter, is for us to create awareness. There are people who perpetrate violence online without actually knowing that they are perpetrating violence. So I think it's very important for us to ensure that we use this year's 16 days um, against gender-based violence to create more awareness about this concerning and highly rising form of violence against women and girls. And I think we also need to call upon different stakeholders, of course, with the government as the anchor of this, to ensure that we are all taking responsibility on addressing online violence. This is a responsibility of everybody. I think whilst government has, the role to play in framing policies and frameworks, and of course, resourcing responses to digital violence, we also, as civil society organizations, as women's rights organizations, as young people, as community leaders, have a role to play in ensuring that those laws are enforced. And of course, not to speak, not to leave behind people in the digital spaces, technology companies, people in the media. It's a responsibility for all of us.
And perhaps finally, and if you could answer briefly, for any woman that might be listening right now and is being harassed, threatened, or violated online, where can they seek help and what steps should they take?
So there's different levels of accessing help for women who are experiencing violence. Of course, we have the police, as a first line of response. We have also health facilities where they can receive help, especially women who have maybe had physical harm inflicted on them, or women who have been sexually violated. There are also community leaders who are very responsive or who are supporting the efforts of government in identifying those cases at the community level and ensuring that they are linked to services. But we also have the Tutuzela centers, for example. The Tutuzela centers are very critical to offer temporary accommodation to women who are undergoing violence. So there's different places where women can access services, and women who have access to telephones could also call the the toll-free numbers which are available. I think there are different toll-free numbers that are available that women who have access to telephones can actually call.
Jennifer, thank you so much indeed for joining us and talking about this very, very important subject. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for having us.
That was Jennifer Asio, the program specialist for ending violence against women at UN Women South Africa.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
It's now 7 o'clock Central African time. Good morning if you've just joined us. It is the second hour of Rise and Shine. We're coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. I am Asanda Beda on www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can connect with us. Also via live streaming on YouTube at Channel Africa 1 is our handle. That also goes for other social media platforms where we welcome your thoughts.
Yes, and I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks so much indeed for joining us on this Tuesday edition of the program. Coming up in the next half an hour or so, we'll be taking a look at a number of things. One of them, President Lula of Brazil visiting Mozambique, a fellow Lusophone country, and also the EU African Union Summit, which is currently underway in Angola. These two groupings have had a long relationship over time, and we find out a little bit more about the current session. That and more still to come after the news, as we say good morning once again to Chwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. South Africa's handover of the G20 presidency to the United States scheduled for today will be a low-key event. The G20 summit closed in Johannesburg on Sunday without a ceremonial handover to the US, its next chair, after Washington boycotted the summit. The Sherpa of South Africa's G20 presidency and Director General of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Zane Dango, says it will probably be done by a senior official from DIRCO to a US diplomatic representative at the department's offices in Pretoria. The leading challenger in Guinea-Bissau's presidential election, Fernando Diaz and President Umaro Sissoco Embalo's camp, have both declared victory before the release of official results, each claiming over half the vote. The dueling assertions risk escalating strife in the coup-prone West African country after Sunday's vote, in which the party that led the fight for independence from Portugal was excluded for the first time. Instead, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde threw its support behind Diaz. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have announced a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire with the Sudanese army. It comes a day after the army dismissed a truce proposal from international mediators, saying it favoured the RSF. Mediators have denied the accusations and said the proposed plan aims to stop the war. Sudan has plunged into famine with tens of thousands of civilians killed since the civil war broke out in April 2023. As South Africa observes the start of 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children today, civil society movements say there needs to be a clear plan of action, preventative measures and strategies amid gender-based violence and femicide being classified a national disaster. Government officially classified GBVF a national disaster last week following growing protests. Although some activists have questioned the timing of the announcement, others are happy about the declaration. The movement believes healthcare systems and facilities will need to be funded. Some activists believe a change of behavior is also required.
So you cannot take it back. Now it's enough of we are a national crisis, we are speaking, now it's time for action.
The existing national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide that was drafted in 2019 needs to be revisited. So since the plan was drafted, we have surely seen an increased number of women and children being violated, murdered, abused, raped.
And finally, a volcano in northeastern Ethiopia has erupted for the first time in nearly 12,000 years, sending thick plumes of smoke 14 kilometers up into the sky and across the Red Sea toward Yemen and Oman. The Haile Gubi volcano, located in the Afar region, spewed giant ash clouds for several hours on Sunday. The BBC's Aksia Wandera has the details.
Local authorities say ash and haze covered areas within 8 kilometers of the volcano, and people up to 50 kilometers away had reported hearing the explosion. Professor Atalia Yele of Addis Ababa University told the BBC that the eruption stood out because the volcano had been dormant for thousands of years. There are no confirmed casualties. Ethiopia's Afar regional government has issued warnings that ash and smoke from the eruption could pose health risks to surrounding communities and said it was working on protective measures.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Ngwembe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In a sports headline, Lesotho Football Association opens its CAF A license diploma course. India face home series defeat by South Africa. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
At 5 minutes past 7 Central African Time, let's talk the EU and African Union Summit now. This is underway in Luanda, Angola, marking 25 years of partnership between the two continents and coming as several African nations celebrate 50 years of independence. Leaders are meeting to discuss peace and security, trade, multilateralism, and migration. With us to unpack the significance of the summit is political analyst and strategic risk advisor Marissa Laurencio. Marissa, thank you for joining us, and always great having these catch-up sessions with you. How are you on this particular Tuesday?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Asanda. It's great to be back on the show again.
Great. It's been a busy week and I guess month for the continent. So the EU-AU partnership and the summit marking 25 years of this and 50 years of independence for some African nations. Why is this moment significant for both continents?
Well, I think for both, it's a nice reminder, that, of course, many EU member states, their influence or involvement on the African continent spans centuries. But it shows that we were able to kind of reset these relationships and kind of continue working forward in a different way, that even after these countries got independent, European member states didn't necessarily retreat. They carried on being involved on the continent. And I think coming, today and seeing 25 years alongside 50 years of independence has shown us that the relationship has continued in a different way, but in a much more positive way, where African countries have more agency than they did in the previous relationship with EU member states.
Let's unpack the theme. It's promoting peace and prosperity through effective multilateralism. From your perspective, are the EU and African priorities aligned, especially when it comes to peace and security?
So I think this is a very difficult one because at the moment we find that the EU doesn't appear to have a very coordinated policy towards Africa. And I think this is because it's very focused on its own domestic issues back home. We have some divergence between EU member states. The relationship with the US has also changed under President Trump. And this has created a lot of flux for them. And as a result, again, honing in on these domestic issues means that they focus a little bit less on some of their global partnerships. And this has included Africa. Then if we look at the African continent, there tends to be quite a fragmented and disjointed response. We don't always find leaders on the same page, always able to cooperate. We find them unable even to cooperate among the smaller regional bodies like the EAC. Obviously, ECOWAS, has not really been able to survive all of the regime changes in the Sahel region in particular. So because of all of the fragmentation and all of the challenges politically and with security that are happening within the EU and then within the AU as well, I think it's difficult for individually them to come to kind of a cohesive security overview, never mind sort of reaching one together. And I think we also have to remember that the AU is home to a lot of member states, and this also makes decision making quite difficult.
Europe also supports countries through the European Peace Facility, especially on civilian and military missions. So how do you view Europe's security footprint on Africa?
I think it's definitely waned. It's more sort of involved in kind of peacekeeping missions, but it doesn't have as strong a presence as it would like, or else it operates, or else it supports the African countries that it's closest to with security. But this has definitely brought in challenges. I think the EU member state that's under the most pressure in Africa, of course, has been France, and its influence and its role in security has significantly declined. If we look at a country like Portugal, which still has heavy involvement in its former colonies as well, it sort of provides training support, to individual countries rather than wider continental efforts. And yes, the EU has approved packages of security support to countries like Rwanda when they are in bilateral missions, and other countries like Mozambique. But as a whole, this is not usually financing for combat training. It's or financing for when these troops are in combat. It's more for training and support. So I think that security footprint has waned quite significantly.
Let's talk Africa's economic priorities now and how they are high on the agenda. How can the continent ensure its development goals and interests are fairly represented in partnerships with the EU?
So this is a really interesting one because it came up at the G20 summit as well. And basically the focus in terms of economic priorities has been on debt. And we've seen now that at the AU-EU summit in Angola that this theme has carried on. The thing is, this is not new for Africa. It comes up every few years to say that Africa is unfairly prejudiced when it comes to risk premium. And then as a result, it's got higher debt servicing costs, which means that it has to divert spending priorities away from other pressing social spending priorities. But the thing is that I think it's difficult because when we speak about these issues, Africa is not a monolith. Different countries have different debt challenges. And what we normally find with African countries is that even though we all kind of operate underneath the AU can't enforce decisions. Individual states can still choose which path they would like to take. And we find, unfortunately, that when it comes to these economic priorities, even when we have things in common, leaders prefer to go it alone. They prefer to work out their own deals. So I think it's good to see, economic issues on the table, but I think the only way to really sort of say, well, how can the EU help us? Obviously, as one of the lenders to the continent, we also need to come up with a cohesive strategy and a cohesive response. And I'm not sure that we will be able to achieve that.
Migration and mobility, now let's talk about that. These remain sensitive topics on the continent. How balanced is the EU-AU approach, and does it reflect Africa's priorities as it should?
What I think the EU and the AU will speak about a lot is the need for regional integration to be improved. And the EU, this has been an agenda of especially Germany around 10 years ago, where it believes that if we can improve domestic economies in Africa, this will actually have the impact of curbing migration because people will not necessarily feel the need to leave the continent if they have enough economic and social opportunities back at home. I still think that the EU does follow this policy, but I think that it's a very difficult topic at the moment, especially since President Trump came in because of his curbing down on migration. I think that the EU itself, many of its member states, politically, it's becoming untenable to have the high levels of migration that it does. So I think this is quite a sensitive topic for the summit, and I'm not sure it's going to be discussed in necessarily the kind of detail and with the kind of honesty that we might see. So far, we've just sort of seen the EU focus on things like the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement, and just saying that Africa needs to facilitate movement across its borders to unlock economic growth. But the implication there is that it's facilitating movement across Africa, not outside of Africa, or necessarily between Africa and the EU.
Right, so the hosts are Angola for the summit. What does this say about the general regional role and diplomatic ambitions of Angola?
I think for Angola, it's a great opportunity, of course, for the Angolan President Lourenço to sort of position himself not just as a president, but more as a kind of senior statesman. And we have seen him being involved in other regional efforts throughout his time in office since 2017. The most notable one was the Luanda peace process, when he was trying to mediate between the DRC and Rwanda. He's also the chairman of the AU at present. It rotates annually, so he's been the chairman since the beginning of this year. So it's sort of a way for him to leave his mark on politics that go beyond the country, for sure. So I think it's also an important moment to show that Angola does have good relations with the West, including with the EU, and that this relationship goes beyond just its formal colonial master, Portugal. It actually extends to the wider EU bloc.
Finally, what are the takeaways that you are hoping will come out of this summit, as well as what lessons we can take from those outcomes in summary?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what if the EU can actually define which infrastructure projects it is mobilizing capital towards, and if any of this financing is actually unlocked. So I'm always a little bit skeptical of summits, because a lot of the time they turn out to be little more than talk shops. And I think that this one is coming at a particularly difficult time, because as I mentioned, many EU member states are very focused on domestic priorities because of political changes over the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, maybe since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war. And then President Trump coming into office. And this makes it difficult for them to focus on external issues. And then when you look at African member states, again, as I mentioned, the continent is quite fragmented. But I think if we could get clarity on exactly what the EU wants to support, that would go a long way into understanding where is this relationship going to go. I don't expect to receive that, though. I think, again, we will get a lot of bold statements coming forward, again, about debt, about infrastructure financing, about support, about the long relationship that Europe has had in Africa. But I don't necessarily think we will get too much out of it this time around. But it will be interesting, especially if we can look under the Global Gateway Fund. African countries have been identified as a priority underneath that. So it'll be interesting to see if we get any news or updates on that.
And the kind of influence, if it should, on the G7 from this?
That's another tricky one, because again, we're coming at a time where both
Marissa, are you still with us? Right, I think the signal there has just gone haywire again, but we're going to leave it there for now. Marissa Lorenzo, thank you so much. If you can hear us, for your time. The line there just got cut. I think it's a signal. We had that issue earlier in the show. A political analyst and strategic risk advisor, sharing her thoughts, her insights on the EU-African Union Summit. It's happening in Luanda, Angola.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
OK. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Our fitness coach, her name is Yvonne Dimagazo Pasha. How to remain consistent with gyms, Dima. And I'm going to put you on the spot right now. As we are talking, I will send you my picture and I want you to tell me what you think I should work on. Because, you know, when I look at myself, Dima, I think I'm very handsome. I'm so good looking. Like, oh my goodness. Like here at Channel Africa where I work, I think I'm one of the most good looking people ever. Like sometimes when I look at myself in the mirror, I never get used to how good I look. I'm just amazing.
You're okay with the way you're looking. You wish people could have and now you want to put me on the spot.
Do I need gym?
Yeah. I mean, if you can just consider eating healthy, cutting down a few foodstuffs such as junk.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Kyiv will continue working with the United States on an updated peace framework aimed at ending the war with Russia, but insists that any compromise must strengthen, not weaken, Ukraine. He says his comments come as the US and Ukrainian negotiators report meaningful progress in Geneva, Switzerland. Bonolo Maribe has more.
Speaking via video link to a parliamentary summit in Stockholm, Sweden, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that the country is entering a critical phase in its talks with the United States and European partners on a possible roadmap to end the nearly 4-year war with Russia.
Right now, we are at a critical moment, and we are working closely with the United States, with European partners, with many others to define steps that can end Russia's war against us, against Ukraine, and bring real security.
He stressed that Kiev is engaging with Washington on compromise positions, but also warned that no agreement can come at the expense of Ukraine's security or sovereignty.
Of course, we all continue working with partners, especially the United States, and look for compromises that strengthen but not weaken us. And we will continue explaining how dangerous it is to pretend that aggression is something one can simply overlook and move on.
Zelensky revealed that talks with the US have kept sensitive issues on the table, including the release of all Ukrainian prisoners of war and the return of children taken to Russia during the conflict.
In the steps we have coordinated with the side of the US, we managed to keep extremely sensitive points on the table, including the full release of all Ukrainian prisoners of war under the all for all formula, and civilians, and the complete return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. These are important steps, but to achieve real peace, more is needed.
He also urged European lawmakers to defend core principles, that borders cannot be redrawn by force, and that Russia must be held accountable, including thorough decisions on frozen Russian assets.
And it is crucial to support the principles on which Europe stands, that borders cannot be changed by force, that war criminals must not escape justice, and that the aggressor must pay fully for the war he started. And this is why decisions on Russian assets are essential.
Meanwhile, a 28-point proposal proposed by US President Donald Trump is under discussion. Though European partners express concerns, it may be too favorable to Moscow. Further negotiations are scheduled, potentially including a visit from Zelensky to Washington, as both sides seek to narrow gaps in the peace plan. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News.
Now, today, following his attendance at the G20 summit in Johannesburg, the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, is in Mozambique at the invitation of President Daniel Chapo. Their meeting follows a bilateral encounter at the COP30 earlier in November, where both leaders committed to deepen cooperation across areas such as agriculture, education, health, entrepreneurship, and the fight against organized crime. Shortly after his arrival in Maputo, Lula da Silva underscored Brazil's readiness to expand support for Mozambique's pharmaceutical manufacturing, biofuel investment, food security, and educational training programs. It's his fourth visit to the country and marks a new phase in the 50-year diplomatic relationship between the two Portuguese-speaking nations. Well, to unpack the implications of this visit and what it means for Mozambique, we're now joined by Vilke Diaz, who's the Executive Director of Democracy and Development in Mozambique, Decide Mozambique. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on the program, and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you so much for that invite.
Perhaps we can start by asking, how would you characterize the Brazilian-Mozambique relationship, given its diplomatic roots since the 1970s, and I guess evolving through successive Brazilian administrations over time?
So Mozambique has always had an excellent relationship with Brazil. Brazil is one of the first countries to recognize Mozambique after the fighting against the colonialism. So after that, we saw so many actions or diplomatic actions in the cooperation sector between Mozambique and Brazil. In the agriculture industry and etc. But I think after the Bolsonaro on power, it only cooled the relationship with that two countries. And right now, maybe we will see some new faces after the Bolsonaro that cooled relation between Mozambique and Brazil. Just it's important to say after Bolsonaro, not only Mozambique have cut the significant relationship with Brazil. We have so many other the African countries, but for Mozambique we have some special. When I said some special, it's because we talk the same language, Portuguese, and it's more simple to communicate. It more simple to have a straight relation between the two countries. Cultural also, we saw, for example, in the cinema, in the other sectors, agriculture and etc. We saw in the first mandate of Lula da Silva, and right now we have one other hope to try to change that face.
I mean, both economies have got different strengths. What does Brazil gain from Mozambique and vice versa?
For Brazil, this is the good land to expand the natural resources, but the products of Brazil produce during the years to export that products. I remember in the first and second mandate of Lula da Silva, we received so many products from Brazil. Because Brazil is one of the leaders, for example, in the agriculture sector. We receive it, for example, chickens and other products from Brazil. And right now, the Brazilian president give that he said it's maybe in the future we can create one more time one exportation line to put the Brazilian products in Mozambique. But it's very important to comment to Mozambique need also to export that our products to Brazil because we have so many things. If you look to the last years, Mozambique was continue to produce, so increase the products, the natural products here, and maybe it's one of the very big opportunity to export that products to Brazil. But we have one other very important thing to say here. It's one very big opportunity to Mozambique to explore more the agriculture sector, to try to have more young people, for example, have access to that. To techniques and the other form to development the agriculture in our country, because we have so many lands here, but we don't have the technique, and maybe it's the one form to try to help that people, the young people who don't have any job for the moment. So maybe we can explore more at that part with Brazil relation, and maybe we can win for now in short time, have that results, and maybe we can put down the climate here in Mozambique, or very dangerous, or political dangerous at the moment.
And that's where we're going to have to leave it for today. Thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on this important visit for both Mozambique and Brazil. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
That was Wilke Diaz, who's the Executive Director of Decide Mozambique, which in full is the democracy and development of Mozambique, and talking to us about this very important visit by Brazil's President Lula da Silva to Mozambique. They had met at COP30 and agreed that they should meet again to deepen relationships between the two. And after finishing at the G20 meeting in South Africa, President Lula da Silva went across the border to Mozambique, where he is having this state visit with his Mozambican counterpart. Well, that brings us neatly to 7:30 Central African time, which means it's time for your news headlines, as we say good morning once again to Dwalane Tulo Ngwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have announced a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire with the Sudanese army. South Africa's handover of the G20 presidency to the United States, scheduled for today, will be a low-key event. And activists have warned the South African government not to ignore the root causes of gender-based violence and femicide, including unemployment, poverty, and financial inequality. Thus, this follows last week's announcement classifying GBVF as a national disaster. I will have details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's now find out what's happening in the world of sports as we say good morning again to Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And in this hour, we begin with football news. The Lesotho Football Association this week opened its CAF A licensed diploma course, attracting 23 coaches from across the region. Among them is Bafana Bafana assistant coach Helman Midnight Express Mkhalele. The important CAF A diploma course officially began at the Bambata Tsita Sports Arena in Maseru, Lesotho. The program is led by renowned CAF and FIFA coach educator Serame Letswaka, assisted by local instructor and CAF A graduate Naledi Tsido. Bafana Bafana assistant coach Helman Mkhalele says enrolling in the CAF A license course currently underway in Maseru, Lesotho is part of his commitment to strengthen his coaching credentials and preparing for future national leadership roles.
And first and foremost, I would like to first thank LIFA, the Lesotho Football Association, for creating an opportunity for me to be part of the student, because it's not an easy thing especially for a foreign coach to come and be provided with an opportunity to gain knowledge. Because as I'm here as a coach, it is important that, number one, you have the necessary skills and knowledge on how to develop players.
The former Bafana Bafana winger says while he brings experience from the national team setup, his previous training is not enough for the level he wants to reach.
And first and foremost, I would like to first thank LIFA, the Lesotho Football Association, for creating an opportunity for me to be part of the student, because it's not an easy thing especially for a foreign coach to come and be provided with an opportunity to gain knowledge. Because as I'm here as a coach, it is important that, number one, you have the necessary skills and knowledge on how to develop players.
Hugo Broos, the head coach of South Africa's men's football team, named a 54-man preliminary squad for the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations finals in Morocco. Broos will narrow down the squad to 23 players in early December for the competition, which will take place from the 21st of December to January 18th. Mamelodi Sundowns veteran forward Themba Zwane has made the preliminary squad, with Broos still hoping he can prove his form and fitness. On to cricket news. India conceded a massive 288-run first innings lead and faced a series defeat after they were bowled out for 201 by South Africa on day 3 of the second test in Guwahati. Seamer Marco Jansen took 6 wickets off 48 balls before the tourists closed on 26 for nothing. That's a dark 314 runs ahead, and now firm favourites to seal a 2-0 series victory. On to motor racing. Mick Schumacher, son of Formula One legend Michael, will race the IndyCar next season after signing with Rahal Letterman Lenigan Racing. The 26-year-old has spent the past 2 years competing in the World Endurance Championship with Alpine, following his exit from Formula One at the end of 2022. IndyCar features 6 oval races among its 17 events, including the iconic Indianapolis 500. RLL confirmed plans for Schumacher to undergo an oval test in preparation. The new season gets underway on the 1st of March. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
The United States was very vocal at the beginning of South Africa's G20 presidency, and this is largely due to strained relations with South Africa at the time, that they were not really keen on participating. Where do they stand right now?
The US is planning to take over the presidency of the G20 next year, and our understanding from them is that they intend to continue to do so, and therefore it is quite difficult then to be in a situation where you are not attending deputies' meetings or discussions during our presidency and then to take over the presidency next year. From a finance track perspective, there has been engagement. We've been working on a communique last week and this week here in Zimbabwe. What's important about that is that it's a consensus document. And so all the members in the room have to agree to the language that is used there. And our US colleagues have been part of those discussions and negotiations.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa. The African perspective. The voice of the continent. Now online. With all your sports fixtures, lifestyle, and more.
Let's find out once again what's happening in the world of business as we say good morning to you, Tabiso Lihoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. The Globe Leaks conference, currently underway in South Africa, says it wants to advance the voice of the Global South. The event is convened in Pretoria with experts from the Global South discussing key issues like regulating artificial intelligence in Africa. Professor Geshikaruri Sabina is the Globe Leaks 2025 Scientific Committee member.
And our conversations are very much about how we amplify the Global South's voice to this, during this period of our G20 presidency around issues of innovation, around issues of economic development, really trying to drive policy influence. The theme of the conference this year is innovation for sustainable and inclusive development, for resilience and to meet global challenges.
The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa says the power utility Eskom workers must be fairly compensated for keeping the power utility running as wage talks resume today. Unions are pushing for a 15% increase after last week's opening meeting on the bargaining framework. This as Eskom continues to face pressure over wages and financial stability. Spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola.
If you look at Eskom's overall performance, they have finally made a profit margin of over 16 billion. And of course, that kind of turnover, that kind of performance, the fact that Eskom, as we speak right now, has gone over 600 days without load shedding, that it has an energy availability factor of over 90%. All of that can be attributed to the hard work of those who are negotiating right now in this forum with the employer.
South African mobile operator Cell C has raised about $156 million through a share offer ahead of listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange this week. The offer, which closed on the 21st of November, priced the shares at 26.50 Rand each, below a previously set range of 29.50-35.50 Rand, valuing the company at roughly 90 billion Rand. Trading on the JSE is expected to start on Thursday, the 27th of November. Ghana's central bank is considering another interest rate cut after inflation fell faster than anticipated. This has left real borrowing costs at elevated levels that could constrain the economy's recovery. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee slashed its main interest rate by a record of 350 basis points to 21.5% at its last meeting in September, citing a sustained fall in inflation. Asian share markets rallied as hopes grew the Federal Reserve will deliver a December interest rate cut, while investors piled into global technology stocks, shrugging off concerns that the sector was becoming overheated. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan rose 1%, led mainly by tech stocks, recouping some of the losses from last week when it fell 4%. The index is on course for a 3.8% drop in the month, its first monthly decline since March. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 453, Botswana 13.32, Kenya 128 shillings 677, in Zambia 22 kwacha 5. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 rubles 39. Russia 78 rubles 38. India 89 rupees 21. China 71.10. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 31 cents. 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Gold is trading at $4,145 and platinum $1,560 per ounce. Brand crude oil is at $63.09 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lohoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
South Africa's G20 security cluster says that it's satisfied with its handling of security operations during the historic summit, the first ever held on African soil. On the final day of the gathering on Sunday, officials from the Border Management Authority and the South African Police Service told Channel Africa that the event remained incident-free. Only a few planned protests were recorded outside the Nasrec Expo Centre in Johannesburg, including a demonstration by anti-migration group Operation Dudula, which attempted to gain access to the venue to voice its concerns to world leaders, but was denied. Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbewe has this report.
Following the successful hosting of the G20 summit in Johannesburg, leaders of key law enforcement agencies, including the Border Management Authority and the South African Police Service, expressed satisfaction with their efforts to keep the event as safe as possible, with the global figures such as India's Narendra Modi, Turkey's Tayyip Erdogan, and Brazil's Lula da Silva descending on South African shores to help shape the future of international cooperation. Security operations were significantly intensified. This heightened readiness ensured that the summit proceeded smoothly and remained free of major incidents, reinforcing South Africa's capability to host high-level global gatherings. Speaking to Channel Africa, PMA's Commissioner Michael Masiapato said this time the agency was proactive.
As the Border Management Authority, we are very much excited that this time around we were very much proactive in terms of facilitating the people that were coming for the G20. So what we did, we actually ahead of time engaged with DERCO and made sure that effective communication goes to all the countries in terms of the key requirements for them to enter the Republic. Those that needed visas were very much explicit for those that needed, for example, yellow fever certificates, we were very much explicit. And on the basis of that proactive communication, we can really confirm that things went very much well. There hasn't been much challenge.
Masiapato says the BMA dealt with minor incidents concerning agricultural biosecurity.
But of course, as part of the normal practice, from an agricultural biosecurity point of view, we did have incidences there and there where people came with agricultural products, whether it's animal products or even plant and products, and they tried to actually come with those in the country. And unfortunately for those, we had to confiscate, we had to get them destroyed on that basis. So those are not serious issues per se, but those are just ordinary part of the work. We have to make sure that we send them to the incineration and get them effectively destroyed. So all of those things actually were done just to make sure that everything goes well.
Effective queue management was applied in the ports of entry to deal with the surging influx of summit delegates.
The issues of the queues and all of those, we didn't have any of those. Out of the 44 cubicles at OR Tambo, for instance, they were all taken care of together with the 4 additional ones for the purposes of dealing with health issues.
The South African Police Service's National Deputy Commissioner, Tibello Mosikili, gave a moving tribute to her troops who raised the security bar, including restricting protesters from the venue.
Maybe with that comment, it will be unreasonable and unethical of me not to thank the officers and the members. They heeded to the call, and here we are today, incident-free event. There are things that happened, they happened outside of this, but because we have planned for any eventuality anywhere else in around Gauteng and in the country, because there are those protest marches that Women for Change, that was countrywide. They were planned for, they were escorted, they were ushered to the places of their choice where they want to voice and air their concerns.
However, the event almost got overshadowed by South African anti-migrant movement, Operation Dudula protesters who attacked law enforcers but were neutralized.
It's just unfortunate that here around Gauteng, there was that incident that happened with Operation Dudula. There was a protest march, and Operation Dudula wanted to access the area that is restricted, area that has been declared as a sterile area for the operational members to operate. They were directed into the designated area to go and do and air their voices, raise their voices as loud as they can, have allocated authority that will go and address them, but that was not good enough, and they attacked. So when you attack the state, as we have indicated, that please air your voices, but remain within the confines of the law, which is what we need to respect as a sovereign country, that we do have protocols, security protocols in the country that we need to follow.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
With gratitude for the voices, the rhythm, and the dreams that unite us all.
Roho ya Afrika inaishi katika kila hadithi tunayosimulia.
Each new day is a gift, a reminder to pause, to breathe, and to give thanks for the laughter we share and the journeys we take and the stories that shape who we are.
Cada nascer do sol, lembre-te algo pelo qual ser grato.
La vie est un voyage, parcourons-la avec gratitude.
Channel Africa, celebrate the beauty of life with gratitude for the voices, the rhythms, and the dreams that unite us all. This is Africa with Channel Africa, the African perspective. 9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Dr. Anthony Ajayi, a leading researcher at the African Population and Health Research Center in Kenya, ending mistreatment and building dignity for adolescents during childbirth. Mistreatment and what's happening with these pregnant young girls. Let's talk a little bit about how the health system responds to that.
It's currently not a major priority for the health system in general, even for the departments of health or the ministries of health on the continent, and it should be because what is healthcare if it's not offered with dignity? You know, because young people can challenge this mistreatment themselves if they are aware of their rights. They should be able to have channels to report mistreatment and seek redress, and that's really important. Neglect, abuse are unacceptable in the health facility.
Keeping you on the know and on the move. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Just a little shy of 7:50 Central African Time. We look at this story now. While production in South Africa's mining industry has turned positive in the past few months, buoyed by prices of gold and platinum group metals, or PGMs, the local industry is faced with many challenges, from logistics to the closure of smelters, and now the divestment of Anglo-American and looming retrenchments. The immediate future is uncertain. The scramble for Africa's abundant critical minerals means there is a potential for mining to support economic growth if properly harnessed. Is South Africa able to take advantage of opportunities and bring life into this sector? Longtime mining analyst Peter Major joins us now to try and answer that question. Thank you for joining us, Peter. How are you this morning?
Very well, Sanda. Thank you. Hope you guys are just as well.
As well. Thank you so much. I mean, you've literally grown up in this sector. Firstly, how would you characterize South Africa's mining sector currently?
People use the word challenges. Mining is always a challenge. You know, you're going where nature doesn't want you to go. You're going underground. You're going under a mountain. You're trying to do this safe all the time, but you have to do it economically. If you can't mine economically, the money will go somewhere else. It'll go to the IT sector. It'll go to property. So those are the normal challenges in mining. Unfortunately, we have many abnormal challenges in this country. We put together a company called Eskom 100 years ago to make the challenge of electricity less extreme. We put together the company Transnet to make the challenge of moving our material less extreme. We formed the IDC to help with funding. So for 100 plus years, government did a lot to make the challenges of mining less extreme, and that attracted money. It attracted investors, and it grew this industry into be a titan. But the last 20, 30 years, government has been introducing challenges that the mining industry didn't have. And not only has it been introducing new challenges, but it's been putting back challenges like electricity, transport, ports, railroads. And we know Zama Zamas, we know BE, nationalizing all of the mineral resources when companies had put in billions of dollars over decades, and now all of your minerals were taken away from you, and you had to follow a huge scorecard of getting temporary use of those minerals back. So, yeah, mining here has more challenges than it's ever had in its history in South Africa. And there's more challenges in mining South Africa than in the rest of Africa. So you see billions of dollars going to the DRC, billions of dollars going to Zambia, Kenya, Maui. So we want the billions here. We have to remove some of the challenges, as many as possible.
So, has anything been done then to do that, to remove some of these challenges that you mentioned, amongst them the issue of illegal mining and logistics that you touch on, in your point of view?
No, there's been talk about it, but I'm afraid government is too stretched and they're too ideologically bound to rescind any of the legislation they've done. So they keep fine tuning the legislation that has added these challenges. Look, they are working at getting Eskom doing better than it's done the last 10, 15 years, but they will never get Eskom anywhere close to where it was up until the 1990s. They will never be able to get Transnet anywhere close to where it was up until the 1990s. And the illegal miners, are they containing that? You know, and what about criminal syndicates that are operating inside mining companies? So government, unfortunately, has unleashed too many of these syndicates that now cannot be put back in the box. So unless government can address specific problems, and I mean address them doesn't mean talk. It means either rescind the legislation or turn that part over to private industry or someone that can handle the problem. So the government's got to learn talking is way at the back of the dictionary, doing is way at the front. And somehow they got to move to the front of these problems, not be at the back of them talking about them.
The divestment of Anglo-American is an end of an era for some. They might argue that. What do you make of its move to Canada, and what does this mean for its secondary listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange?
Look, the longer that secondary listing stays here, the better for everybody, especially for South African investors. As far as moving to Canada, look, do we really care if Anglos is based in the UK or if it's based in Canada? Yeah, we kind of do, because the UK has a much more affinity for investing in Africa than the Canadians do. That said, the Canadians have put a lot more money into Africa the last 10, 20 years than the UK. So yeah, maybe I better eat my words. It shouldn't really matter. Time zones, and maybe I'm thinking too much historically. Yeah, that the UK, they were the people that put the most money into Africa mining, that developed it. But yeah, the Canadians, they have put much more money into Zambia and into the DRC than UK investors have. So if anything, Anglo should be happy if they move to Canada because they have a much more willing market, willing to fund them, government willing to go the extra mile to help them. The Canadian government has shown a lot more effort and desire to have mining done in it than the South African government has shown have desire in mining here. So yeah, I don't see a problem there. I think it could do Anglos a bit of good if they move to Canada.
Yeah. We understand that President Cyril Ramaphosa opened a mine last week in Limpopo province here of the country. But are we seeing exploration happening? Are there issues of delays in issuing licenses and concerns with the cadastral system? And are these being appropriately attended to?
If we go in reverse, no, the cadastral system is not being appropriately dealt with. It's taken far, far too long. It's taken more than 22 years to deal with. If government could put more emphasis into implementing that system, and they should have taken a system that was well proven instead of trying to invent one from scratch. If they were serious, they would have bought a well proven one and installed it 15, 20 years ago, if they were serious. As far as that mine being developed in Limpopo, that is a huge achievement that everybody should be proud of. And the government should be honored to have that mine. That was a big investment. It's still a big investment. Government must bend over backwards and do cartwheels to ensure that mine is successful. That is a Canadian derived mine, although it's mostly Asian money that's gone into it. But Robert Friedland, arguably the greatest mining entrepreneur that we have in the world right now. He's the Elon Musk of mining. And Robert Friedland was able to get the money for that mine when the other mining companies didn't have the money or didn't have the desire to do it. It's amazing that it's being built. It's a huge mine, huge investment. It's going to do this country enormous good. And if I was the president of this country, I would be twisting Robert Friedland's arm and I'd be going to the international mining community saying, help me build another mine like this. Help us build some mines like this on the gold mines, like we're being built for 100 years, but haven't been built in the last 30. Because these big, deep level gold mines, they're what really employed people and brought wealth to this country. We had 550,000 men on those big gold mines at their peak. We're down to less than 90,000 now, and the gold is still there. But that takes billions of dollars, and it takes real certainty before investors will look at those kind of operations in South Africa.
Thank you so much again for your time, Peter. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having this program.
Great. That's Peter Major, mining analyst there, talking about South Africa's mining sector, its challenges, its opportunities, and some moves towards some of those opportunities, and what needs to be done then to make sure that the production in South Africa's mining industry does turn positive.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
8 o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you. This is the third and final hour of Rise and Shine, the Tuesday edition. And we're broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, and streaming on the internet, www.channelafrica.co.za. And don't forget, you can also catch us on your mobiles. Go to your app store, look for SABC Plus, that's SABC Plus, and then look for Channel Africa.
Coming up in this hour, later on though, we have our gender-based violence feature. That's what we bring to you on Rise and Shine on Tuesdays. And today we'll be speaking about the National Union of Somali Journalists, who have launched a new report that looks into how female journalists are treated in the newsroom and the abuse that they face. We'll find out about that later. First, let's get our news update. Here's Dlalani Tulo Ngwepe, and then following her is Fikile Lingwati with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have announced a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire with the Sudanese army. It comes a day after the army dismissed a truce proposal from international mediators, saying it favoured the RSF. Mediators have denied the accusations and said the proposed plans aim to stop the war. Sudan has plunged into famine with tens of thousands of civilians killed since the civil war broke out in April 2023. South Africa's handover of the G20 presidency to the United States, scheduled for today, will be a low-key event. The G20 summit closed in Johannesburg on Sunday without a ceremonial handover to the US, its next chair, after Washington boycotted the summit. The Sherpa of South Africa's G20 presidency and Director General of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, DIRCO, Zane Dango, says it will probably be done by a senior official from DIRCO to a US diplomatic representative at the Department department's offices in Pretoria. Activists have warned the South African government not to ignore the root causes of gender-based violence and femicide, including unemployment, poverty and financial inequality. This follows last week's announcement classifying GBVF as a national disaster. The Women for Change organization, which led the G20 shutdown protests ahead of the summit, says they didn't expect the declaration to be made before the silent nationwide shutdown. South Africa observes the start of 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children today until the 10th of December. Spokesperson Cameron Kasambala says they now want to see action that equates to the magnitude of the crisis.
There is now a need for urgent and efficient implementation of existing policies and frameworks. So what we're expecting to see is more transparency in reports as well as audits explaining exactly how funding will be allocated better to implement things like the National Strategic Plan, better enforce existing legislation like the Domestic Violence Act, Protection from Harassment Act, looking at perhaps developing a multi-ministerial civil society and a private organization committee that looks at all the different elements of the society and citizens.
Meanwhile, Program Specialist for Ending Violence Against Women at UN South Africa, Jennifer Asio, says digital violence is a growing trend.
And women in leadership and business and politics are particularly targeted by digital violence. And in the world of journalism, 1 in 4 women journalists globally have actually reported online threats of physical violence. And when you look at the African region, about 28% of women interviewed across countries like Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Senegal, and our own South Africa have experienced some form of online violence. And in South Africa alone, studies also show that nearly 40% of women who use the internet report having faced some form of online harassment, and young women and girls are particularly targeted.
And a U.S. federal judge has dismissed charges against the former FBI Director James Comey and the New York Attorney General Letitia James, who've previously investigated Donald Trump. The judge ruled that the prosecutor overseeing both cases had been hired unlawfully. The prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, had been appointed by President Trump after her predecessor refused to bring charges. The BBC's David Willies has the details.
The White House spokesperson, Carolyn Levitt, said the U.S. Justice Department would be appealing this ruling. So this could go some way, and it could, of course, come back to haunt both these two defendants, although it will be under another prosecutor. Letitia James welcomed the judge's ruling. She said that she intends to remain fearless, as she put it, in the face of what she called these baseless charges. And James Comey said the case against him was, and I quote, a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jonani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our headlines, South African IFBB fitness challenge and challenger Lindiwe Mchunu has been placed second in the world. And Bafana head coach Hugo Broos has announced his provisional AFCON squad. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
The handover of the G20 presidency from South Africa to the US is likely to take place today and is expected to be a low-key affair. President Ramaphosa said South Africa used its presidency to gather developed and developing countries to place the priorities of Africa and the global South at the heart of the G20 agenda. Climate change, mobilizing finance for a just energy transition, and taking action to ensure debt sustainability for low-income countries were amongst the resolutions contained in the declaration adopted by member states at the start of the summit. Debo Mukobo attended the G20 Leaders Summit.
I now say that this gavel of this G20 summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed.
And this marks the end of South Africa's G20 presidency, albeit without the customary pomp and ceremony. The wooden gavel would normally be handed over to the leader of the next country to hold the rotating presidency, in this case the United States. Due to differences with Pretoria over climate change inclusion on the agenda and fake claims about a white genocide, Washington decided not to attend the historic gathering, the first ever G20 leader summit on the African continent. And in his closing remarks, President Cyril Ramaphosa emphasized that prosperity begins in the cradle of humankind.
The greatest opportunity for prosperity in the 21st century lies in Africa. Harnessing that opportunity will require a rather strong partnership between Africa and the G20, and indeed between Africa and the rest of the world. Recognizing our interconnectedness as a global community of nations, we have called for an end to conflicts and wars around the globe and for a just and comprehensive and lasting peace.
The G20 Leaders Summit in Africa will be remembered as not just a mere talk shop, but a partnership amongst G20 nations to change the lives of the poor and the most vulnerable, as Ramaphosa explains.
The G20 South Africa Summit Leaders' Declaration is more than words. It is a commitment to concrete actions that will improve the lives of people in every part of the world. Our agreement on a declaration during this summit demonstrates the value of the G20 as a forum that can facilitate joint action on issues of shared concern. More than that, it reaffirms our renewed commitment to multilateral cooperation and our recognition that our shared goals outweigh our differences.
With African countries adversely affected by global greenhouse gas emissions, President Ramaphosa says South Africa's G20 presidency has made progress in mobilizing finance for the just energy transition, insisting that climate-related disasters affect all countries, with the heaviest toll on poor African countries and the global south.
In this regard, South Africa introduced the high-level voluntary principles for investing in disaster risk reduction and encouraged international collaboration to strengthen investment in preventing and responding to disasters. Climate change touches every nation, but it impacts on everyone unevenly. That is why we have together pledged to increase the quality and the quantity of climate finance to developing economies, to strengthen multilateral development banks, and to unlock private capital.
President Cyril Ramaphosa also implored the other G20 partners to act with speed to ensure that the declarations and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals come to fruition. I am Tebo Mokobo in Johannesburg.
Now, South Africa's Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille says that the Gauteng province has generated an estimated $58 million in visitor revenue from this past weekend's G20 events. The figure marks the province's early tourism gains as South Africa concludes its G20 presidency. She says that the strong turnout underscores Gauteng's growing appeal as a global meeting destination. Officials expect the final economic impact to be even higher once all the sectors submit their reports. Channel Africa's economics reporter is Innocent Samosa.
More than 130 G20 meetings took place across South Africa, with the bulk of priority policy discussions hosted in Gauteng. The G20 adopted a declaration agreeing to address climate-related issues, strengthening disaster resilience and response, ensuring debt sustainability for low-income countries. According to Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille, tourism is part of the declaration.
Tourism is certainly part of the declaration. And again, all the G20 countries, we have committed ourselves to continue to work together, to innovate, to invest, to make sure that we improve air access, make travel seamlessly for our visitors, deal with the reforms in our visa regulations. So we will continue to work together. with the G20 summit for South Africa, tourism must be the biggest winner. Our hotels are overflowing from Soweto to Sandton, all over, and we have already also during the year more than 135 working group meetings and ministerial meetings. So the tourism sector is very happy.
The big question is, what becomes of seasonal jobs, especially those in the hospitality industry?
We are also fortunately in the summer season that kicked off in September. So already a lot of those temporary jobs will stay at least until the end of the summer center. But that is why we have to do more to make sure that we absorb especially semi-skilled, unskilled young people, train them, keep them in the sector. Already just in the past 9 months, we've grown by more than 1 million tourists. And the more tourists come, the more jobs we can create.
Delil said arrivals from the United States have now surpassed inbound tourists from the United Kingdom.
More people from the US are coming. They are now ahead of the United Kingdom that has led that market for many years. We've seen an increase in the number of flights between Washington, Newark, Cape Town and Johannesburg, and those flights are fully booked. In fact, they are looking for more frequencies. So as far as tourism is concerned, whatever happened in the geopolitical space had no impact in tourism. In fact, we've seen a positive spin-off.
Dr. Ntabiseng Mulego is an economist at the Stellenbosch Business School.
I think this is a pivotal moment. Firstly, this is the first G20 summit happening on the African continent. This is the first also for South Africa, hosting an economic international diplomacy engagement and cooperation of this nature. I think that significant is the investment flows, just direct tourism. I think besides the engagement in terms of the deliberations of the actual summit, but we've seen from the beginning of the year up until now, flights, hotel bookings, accommodation. The tourism sector is boosted and the value chain around that for catering, the use of our services, whether it's in the media space, people are active.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
South Africa's G20 security cluster says it is satisfied with its handling of security operations during the historic summit, the first ever held on African soil. On the final day of the gathering on Sunday, officials from the Border Management Authority and the South African Police Service told Channel Africa that the event remained incident-free. Only a few planned protests were recorded outside the Nasrec Expo Center in Johannesburg, including a demonstration by anti-migrant group Operation Dudula, which attempted to gain access to the venue to voice its concerns to world leaders, but was denied. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe has more.
Following the successful hosting of the G20 summit in Johannesburg, leaders of key law enforcement agencies, including the Border Management Authority and the South African Police Service, expressed satisfaction with their efforts to keep the event as safe as possible, with the global figures such as India's Narendra Modi, Turkey's Tayyip Erdogan, and Brazil's Lula da Silva descending on South African shores to help shape the future of international cooperation. Security operations were significantly intensified. This heightened readiness ensured that the summit proceeded smoothly and remained free of major incidents, reinforcing South Africa's capability to host high-level global gatherings. Speaking to Channel Africa, BMS Commissioner Michael Masiapato said this time the agency was proactive.
As the Border Management Authority, we are very much excited that this time around we were very much proactive in terms of facilitating the people that were coming for the G20. So what we did, we actually ahead of time engaged with DERCO and made sure that effective communication goes to all the countries in terms of the key requirements for them to enter the Republic. Those that needed visas were very much explicit. For those that needed, for example, yellow fever certificates, we were very much explicit. And on the basis of that proactive communication, we can really confirm that things went very much well. There hasn't been much challenge.
Masiapato says the BMA dealt with minor incidents concerning agricultural biosecurity.
But of course, as part of the normal practice, from an agricultural biosecurity point of view, we did have incidences there and there where people came with agricultural products, whether it's animal products or even plant and products, and they tried to actually come with those in the country. And unfortunately for those we had to confiscate, we had to get them destroyed on that basis. So those are not serious issues per se, but those are just ordinary part of the work. We have to make sure that we send them to the incineration and get them effectively destroyed. So all of those things actually were done just to make sure that everything goes well.
Effective queue management was applied in the ports of entry to deal with the surging influx of summit delegates.
The issues of the queues and all of those, we didn't have any of those. Out of the 44 cubicles at OR Tambo, for instance, they were all taken care of, together with the 4 additional ones, for the purposes of dealing with health issues.
The South African Police Service's National Deputy Commissioner, Tibello Mosikili, gave a moving tribute to her troops who raised the security bar, including restricting protesters from the venue.
Maybe with that comment, it will be unreasonable and unethical of me not to thank the officers and the members. They heeded to the call, and here we are today, incident-free event. There are things that happened, they happened outside of this, but because we have planned for any eventuality anywhere else in around Gauteng and in the country, because there are those protest marches that Women for Change, that was countrywide. They were planned for, they were escorted, they were ushered to the places of their choice where they want to voice and air their concerns.
However, the event almost got overshadowed by South African anti-migrant movement Operation Dudula protesters who attacked law enforcers but were neutralized.
It's just unfortunate that here around Gauteng there was that incident that happened with Operation Dudula. There was a protest march, and Operation Dudula wanted to access the area that is restricted, area that has been declared as a sterile area for the operational members to operate. They were directed into the designated area to go and do and air their voices, raise their voices as loud as they can, have allocated authority that will go and address them, but that was not good enough, and they attacked. So when you attack the state, as we have indicated, that please air your voices, but remain within the confines of the law, which is what we need to respect as a sovereign country, that we do have protocols, security protocols in the country that we need to follow.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126, and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am,
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The Director General, or the Permanent Secretary, as is sometimes described in other parts of the continent, at South Africa's Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, Mlungisi Cele, says that Africa must be allowed to set its own agenda and policies. Cele was speaking at the first day of the Global X conference, which is currently underway in South Africa's capital city, Pretoria. The event has gathered experts from all parts of the world to work on key issues like regulating artificial intelligence in Africa, shaping innovation policy for inclusive development, and the future of green industrial development and critical minerals. Tutongo Beni compiled this report.
The Global Leaks Conference is being held at the National Research Foundation NRF in Pretoria, South Africa, following the G20 Leaders Summit that was held in South Africa, which has placed African leadership at the center of the global innovation agenda, highlighting how developing nations can drive solutions that are inclusive, sustainable, and people-focused. The three-day conference, which ends on Wednesday, is focusing on innovation for sustainable and inclusive development, addressing global challenges such as inequality, climate change, and geopolitical disruptions, particularly affecting developing nations. Delivering the keynote address at the conference, Director General at South Africa's Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, Mlungisi says Africa must be allowed to set its own agenda and policies.
Africa must be allowed to set its own research, knowledge and innovation agenda and determine its priorities, and should not simply rely on importing STI policy frameworks, methodologies and concepts, but must be allowed the possibility to co-create, if not to develop its own.
The conference is co-hosted by the NRF, the University of Johannesburg, UJ, the Department of Science and Innovation, NRF Trilateral Chair in Transformative Innovation, and partners at the Tshwane University of Technology, the University of the Witwatersrand, and the Human Sciences Research Council. The Group Executive for Business Advancement and Global Partnerships at NRF, Dr. Thandi Mgwebi, says the conference aligns with the NRF and says Africa has been at the helm of innovation. However, this has not been well documented.
Africa has always been ready. Africa is at the heart of innovation. What we have not successfully done is to promote that innovation. Africa's innovation is driven by the youth. Africa's innovation is in the rural communities where Africa is thriving. So Africa is ready. Africa has been ready, and Africa has been championing many of the solutions. If you look, for example, at sustainability, we talk about sustainable development. Africa has been the lead in sustainable development through our knowledge systems, our indigenous knowledge system, our traditional systems that have not been documented well. And the fact that it's not been documented, it doesn't mean that it has not been happening.
President of Globalix and UJ's chair in Transformative Innovation, economics professor Erika Krima Mbula, says it takes a while for innovation policies to be in place as they have to include the local communities.
It takes long to get it right, whatever right is, and I'm doing inverted commas here, but to do it better, to keep aligning our aspirations of using innovation and tool and as a driver of inclusive and sustainable development. It takes a very long time to get it right, to get all the voices that you need around the table, particularly communities, not only academics and policymakers. You need communities, civil society to be around the table to really get to the nitty-gritty of what is it that it takes on the ground.
Meanwhile, Professor Tankiso Moloi, Director for Academic at UJ School of Business, says it's coincidence that the conference topics were similar to the G20 points of discussions. Speaking about infrastructure, Moloi says that in bigger cities, younger people have access while those in the rural areas are being left behind.
Question is, do we have sufficient infrastructure, so that they can get access to these things? I can give you an example. The Education, Training and Development Purposes SETA asked me to do a study, on the fourth industrial revolution, the technologies that are there, the systems that are there, the infrastructure, etc., etc. Sadly, you find that there are pockets of excellence. So if you go to bigger cities like Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, also, then you find that access to these technologies, access to the internet is there, so then there are no issues to the extent. So if you go to some private schools, they even provide these supercomputers so that kids can compute, kids can code, etc. But then if you go to rural areas, then there is no access to even the basics of these things. Like, as an example, so some of the early childhood development centers that we kind of went to interview some of the principals there, they just didn't even have electricity. So that could power the computer, even if you left the computers, because there is prolonged time of not having electricity at the time, then they wouldn't open that computer. That's one. Two, then internet is kind of an issue. So I come from rural areas as an example. So sometimes when I'm there, then yes, I have the data on my phone. But then, it will just keep on buffering and buffering. So if you want to supercompute, then it might be an issue.
The conference precedes the Science Forum South Africa, which is a significant event for discussing science, technology, and innovation policies on the African continent. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Bene in Pretoria.
The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi Majola says workers should be compensated adequately for helping keep the lights on at the power utility Eskom. This comes as wage talks are expected to resume on today, Tuesday, 25th November. This is after the unions and Eskom concluded the first meeting last week over the structure of the bargaining process. Eskom faces a 15% wage increase demand from unions. Notando Magudulela reports.
As wage negotiations get underway, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi Majola, calls on workers to be compensated for services rendered at the power utility Eskom. This is unions representing workers at Eskom call for a 15% wage hike. In 2023, a collective agreement was reached with trade unions and Eskom for a period of 3 years. This agreement will come to an end in June 2026. The agreement included a 7% salary increase and 7% increase in the housing allowance per year over the 3-year period.
It is our view that workers have earned whatever increases and demands that they've placed on the table. If you look at Eskom's overall performance, they have finally made a profit margin of over 16 billion. And of course, that kind of turnover, that kind of performance, the fact that Eskom, as we speak right now, has gone over 600 days without load shedding, that it has an energy availability factor of over 90%. All of that can be attributed to the hard work of workers who are negotiating right now in this forum with the employer. And I think it's important that viewers understand that the lights are on because of the sweat and labor of workers at Eskom.
In its financial report, Eskom says its group headcount increased by 1,405 to 42,030 from 40,625 employees in 2025. The power utility says 81% of its workforce is part of a bargaining unit. Eskom says its remuneration includes a basic salary, a 13th check, and a comprehensive suite of benefits such as pension and medical aid, among others, subject to qualifying criteria. Notando Makudulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, let's get our news headlines now as we say good morning again to Dwalane Tulo Ngwebe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning, rather. Making headlines, Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have announced a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire with the Sudanese army. A surge in militant attacks and instability in northern Nigeria is driving hunger to record levels, according to the UN World Food Programme. And finally, data from the United Nations shows that last year, 50,000 women and girls worldwide were killed by partners or family members, equivalent to one dying almost every 10 minutes. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Good morning, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. We begin with South African national champion in the IFBB Fitness Challenge. Lindiwe Mchunu says she's honored have placed second in the IFBB World Fitness Challenge Championship 2025 in Spain, Barcelona. Last week, Mkhunu traveled to Barcelona with an aim of clinching her first international medal. Her dream was realized when she finished second place in the world and third place for speed feat in the individual categories. For the couples category, Mkhunu and her partner finished again in second place. These accolades earned her Proteas colors for international competitions, and she says she's not putting herself under pressure ahead of the LA 2028, but will try to get used to competing globally. On to football news, Derek Katete and Trevor Nasasiro scored on either side of the game as the national under-17 football team beat South Sudan 2-0 at the Sikafa regional qualifiers in Addis Ababa on Monday evening. Junior Stars are on the prowl for the second win of the tournament. The South Sudanese came back all guns blazing in the second half, but the Kenyans held the fort. Their defensive efforts bore fruit at the end of the pitch when Nasasiro latched on a through ball in the 89th minute to slot past the end-rushing keeper. The win now ushers William Moloya's charges into the semis and with a golden chance of qualifying for next year's Africa Cup of Nations. The Lesotho Football Association this week opened its CAF A licensed diploma course, attracting 23 coaches from across the region. Among them is Bafana Bafana assistant coach Helman Midnight Express Mkhalele. The important CAF A diploma course officially began at the Bambata Tsita Sports Arena in Maseru, Lesotho. The program is led by renowned CAF and FIFA coach educator Sirame Letswaga, assisted by local instructor and CAF A graduate Naledi Tsilo. Bafana Bafana assistant coach Helman Mkhalele says enrolling in the CAF A license course currently underway in Maseru is part of the commitment to strengthen his coaching credentials and preparing for future national leadership roles.
And first and foremost, I would like to first thank LIFA, the Lesotho Football Association, for creating an opportunity for me to be part of the student, because it's not an easy thing especially for a foreign coach to come and be provided with an opportunity to gain knowledge. Because as I'm here as a coach, it is important that number one, you have the necessary skills and knowledge on how to develop players.
The former Bafana Bafana winger says while he brings experience from the national team setup, his previous training is not enough for the level he wants to reach.
So for me as a coach, I've also been working at a national team at a senior level. So it is important that I have the right qualification. So I am here to get the qualification, of which is not the main objective. The main objective is to acquire knowledge and skill that I can apply in developing football.
And finally, Mickey Schumacher, son of Formula One legend Michael, will race in the IndyCar next season after signing with Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. The 26-year-old has spent the past 2 years competing in the World Endurance Championship with Alpine, following his exit from Formula One at the end of 2022. IndyCar features 6 oval races among its 17 events, including the iconic Indianapolis 500. RLL confirmed plans for Schumacher to undergo an oval test in preparation. The new season gets underway on the 1st of March. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Let's now find out what's happening in the world of business. We get our economics update from Tabiso Lehogo.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. South Africa's integrated payment system has been regarded as advanced and suitably placed to complement its international partners. The 18th plenary of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Forum on Tax Administration echoed this earlier that international tax collaboration is more critical than ever before. During the plenary, heads of tax administrations made a commitment to advance joint initiatives aimed at easing compliance pressures on taxpayers and strengthening cross-border efforts to close tax gaps. The CEO of Latita Africa, Jermaine Manikas, says South Africa was punching above its weight.
Now, South Africa being on the benchmark of some of this advanced technology, I think we're still ahead of the pace. So we are to still allow the rest of the world to catch up, I guess.
The Globe Leaks conference, currently underway in South Africa, says it wants to advance the voice of the Global South. The event is convened in Pretoria with experts from the Global South discussing key issues like regulating artificial intelligence in Africa. Professor Geshi Karuri Sabina is the Globe Leaks 2025 Scientific Committee member.
And our conversations are very much about how we amplify the Global South's voice to this, during this period of our G20 presidency around issues of innovation, around issues of economic development, really trying to drive policy influence. The theme of the conference this year is innovation for sustainable and inclusive development, for resilience and to meet global challenges.
South African mobile operator Cell C has raised about $156 million through a share offer ahead of listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange this week. The offer, which closed on the 21st of November, priced the shares at 26.50 Rand each below a previously set range of 29.50-35.50 Rand, valuing the company at roughly $520 million. Trading on the JSE is expected to start on Thursday, the 27th of November. Ghana's central bank is considering another interest rate cut after inflation fell faster than anticipated. This has left real borrowing costs at elevated levels that could constrain the economy's recovery. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee slashed its main interest rate by a record 350 basis points to 21.5% at its last meeting in September, citing a sustained fall in inflation. The EU and US ministers have been meeting to discuss implementing a trade agreement reached in August. The EU trade chief Maros Sefcovic held talks with US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Brussels. Lutnick says that the EU should loosen its regulation of the tech sector in exchange for a reduction of US tariffs on metals.
Our suggestion is that the European Union and their trade ministers deeply consider trying to analyze their digital rules, try to come away with a balance, not put them away, but find the balanced approach that works with us. And if they can come up with that balanced approach, then we will handle the steel and aluminum issues and bring that on together.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira for 50. Botswana 13 pula 30. Kenya 128 shillings 66. And Zambia 22 kwacha 93. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you $5.40. Russia 79 rubles 3. India 89 rupees 60. China 7 yuan 10. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 36 cents. 76 pence, a British pound, 86 to the euro. Gold $4,070, platinum $1,528 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $62.42 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabisolo Huku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Nkhanza zokhudza amuna ndi azimayi kapena kuti gender-based violence GBV zikuwononga mioyo komanso kuphwasula midzi. Zikuchitika m'manyumba, m'masukulu, malo ogwirira ntchito ndipo kwambiri mwakachetechete. Koma sizikuyenera kupitirira. Mukazimva yankhulani. Ngati mwakhudzidwa funani chithandizo. Chifukwa kusachita chilichonse sikuthandiza. Mverani kuma wireless onse 14 a SABC kuchokera lachitatu pa 23 mwezi uno wa Julai kuti mumve zokambirana, malangizo, masewero, zionetsero za maphunziro ndi mafunso okhuza nkhanza za amuna ndi azimayi ndi akatswiri, anthu opulumuka ku nkhanzazi, kukhazikitsa lamulo komanso dziko lonse lokhudzidwa ndi nkhanzazi. Zonsezi pa wireless yomwe mumayikonda ya SABC. Imbirani pa nambala 0800 428 428 kuti munene za nkhanzazi kapena kupeza chithandizo. Nkhanza zokhuza amuna ndi azimayi zimatha ndi inu. Uthenga ukufikani kuchokera ku SABC.
Madapiri pazochitika. Madapiri pazochitika.
Mafuta galimoto akwera mtengo mdziko la Malawi ndipo nkhaniyi anthu ayilandira mosiyanasiyana ndipo mtolankhani nzathu mdziko la Malawi Kondwani Nyamasauka tili naye pa line pano kuti atifotokozere zambiri. Kondwani, kodi uli bwanji? Mafuta galimoto kodi akwera kufika pa bwanji?
Mafuta galimoto akwera amene tiyankhula pano kukambonena kuti usiku wathawu petrol wakwera kuchokera pa 2,530 kwacha kukafika pa 3,499 kwacha. Koma nkhani ya mapercentage ndi 38.30%, pamene diesel wachoka pa 2,734 kwacha kukafika pa 3,500 kwacha, yomwe ikuyimira kuma percentage 28.02%.
Zochitika pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lolemba mpaka lachisanu ndi Madapiri. Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za.
The future of Dr. John Hlophe, Deputy President and Parliamentary Leader of South Africa's MK party, is increasingly uncertain as internal tensions escalate. The party has yet to comment on the status of its inquiry into Hlophe, who was suspended from both positions. Analysts say the turmoil points to deeper structural problems within the MK party, where key decisions remain closely tied to its founder, former President of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. Mkokeli Bandla reports.
Dr. John Hlophe's suspension has once again pushed the MKP into the national spotlight, raising questions not only about his position, but also about the party's capacity to govern itself. Political analyst Dr. Ongama Mtimka argues the instability points to more serious internal problems.
The other thing is that it was formed out of politics of vindictiveness. And I've argued that failure to transition from a vindictive movement or a movement that expresses the vindictiveness of the person of Jacob Zuma to becoming a political party with a clear political program is going to ensure that the party doesn't develop further to become sustainable and stand in its own right.
Another analyst says the issue goes beyond individual personalities and cuts to the heart of how the organization is structured. Dr. Nsekelo Breakfast says the party's biggest problem is lack of consultation and structures.
The challenge with MK, which is posing a serious threat to the stability of the party, is that decision-making revolves around the personality of Jacob Zuma. So the issue of not having an elective conference as yet, in my view, I see it as the greatest challenge of the party at the moment. I think you have to have structures that will engage in decision making when issues of suspension and other things are done.
While another political analyst, Nkululeko Montana, adds that there are also concerns that the party is being run more like a family enterprise than a political organization.
Other people are also arguing that this is a family business, this is a family party, and if you cross swords with the daughter of the president, that is Tutusile Zuma, then your fate with the Umkhonto weSizwe party is over. So you can be suspended, you can be fired from the party.
The MKP has declined to comment on Hlophe's matter. Although he is still a member of parliament, his future as the deputy president and parliamentary leader remains unclear. Mkokeli Bandla, SABC News, Parliament.
So, 8:46 Central African time, and we are slowly working our way towards the top of the hour. We have coming up a little bit later on the move. We're hoping to get the team to come in and tell us what is going to be on the show. Always having fascinating subjects for us. And
we kick off 16 days of activism against violence against women and children today.
And it's always sad for me, though, that we have just a period of time when we think about it. It would be nice that by now that there's been a culture shift, that everybody is shocked, horrified when there's violence perpetrated against women and children. But for some reason, it's just a wheel that's taking so long to turn, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and hopefully we can catch up on that story because it was quite an interesting one for our gender-based violence feature on journalists, female journalists in Somalia and what they face in terms of abuse in the newsroom. We couldn't get a hold of our guest on that one. I know we said we're going to have that chat happening later, so we'll try again in the week.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Kapele Mutachi tunaelezwa ya kwamba waziri wa zamani wa polisi Mbekisele ameanza kutoa ushahidi wake mbele ya kamati ya bunge. Pengine namna ambavyo anaelezea na kutoa ushahidi wake, hii ikoje na imekaje? Hali hii ambavyo ilivyo hivi sasa inaleta picha gani kwa raia wa Afrika Kusini?
Hii hali inaleta picha nzuri, kwanza inaonyesha kama usalama wa nchi hauko kwenye njia nzuri. Wakati wale wenyewe wanapewa nafasi ya kufanya ulinzi wa nchi na ulinzi wa raia, wanakwenda kukamatwa na wenyewe kuwa miongoni ya watu wenyewe wanakwenda tena kuziwia wala kuprotect maalifu. Inaleta hali mbaya ndani ya nchi kuhusu usalama kwanza wa nchi peke yake, usalama wa raia.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Now, as South Africa observes that 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children from today, civil society movements say that there needs to be a clear plan of action, preventative measures and strategies amid gender-based violence and femicide being classified as a national disaster. Government officially classified GBV as a national disaster last week following growing nationwide silent shutdowns and protests over violence against women and children. Although some activists have questioned the timing of the announcement, others welcomed the declaration, stating that they've been rallying not only for acknowledgement but also for resources. The movement believes that healthcare systems and facilities will need funding, amongst other measures, to support survivors, and government should also revisit the existing GBF National Strategic Plan that was drafted in 2019. SABC reporter Refilwa Mekwa filed this report.
Civil society movements say violence against women and children has been a crisis for the longest time. They believe the declaration means there's now recognition of the urgent crisis currently plaguing women, children, and members of the LGBTQIA+ community. According to the Women for Change organization, a woman is killed every 15 minutes in the country. The movement wants to see a South Africa where women and children are free from the violence they are currently subjected to. They demand that GBVF be treated with the urgency it deserves. Some activists believe the declaration will also require a change in social behavior within communities.
So I think with it being declared a national disaster, it's important in terms of mobilization to get people to implement strategies that's going to support survivors, but also to prevent violence. Otherwise, we're just going to be treating symptoms of violence and not the problem itself. So when we're talking about the national disaster being declared, we're also talking about changing social behavior. And we've seen this being done with COVID.
Timing-wise, it's also perfect. It's also perfect because you can't take it back. Because you said it at a time where the world, the globe was looking at South Africa. So you cannot take it back. Now it's enough of we are a national crisis. We are speaking. Now it's time for action.
The existing National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide that was drafted in 2019 needs to be revisited. So since the plan was drafted, we have surely seen an increased number of women and children being violated, murdered, abused, raped.
The movement didn't expect the declaration to be made before the silent nationwide shutdown. Spokesperson Cameron Kasabala says they now want to see a reaction that equates to the magnitude of the crisis.
There is now a need for urgent and efficient implementation of existing policies and frameworks. So what we're expecting to see is more transparency in reports as well as audits explaining exactly how funding will be allocated better to implement things like the National Strategic Plan, better enforce existing legislation like the Domestic Violence Act, Protection from Harassment Act, looking at perhaps developing a multi-ministerial civil society and a private organization community that looks at all the different elements of the society and citizens.
Dimakatso Babi is the chairperson of the Civil Society Unmuted organization in the Gauteng region.
I don't know whether to be happy or sad because the timing of the declaration, the timing of the announcement, it is like it was just to make sure to prevent any protestation prior to the G20 Leaders Summit. So the thing that is missing is the implementation plan to say strategies on how they're going to roll out that.
Activists have warned government not to ignore some of the root problems of GBVF, such as unemployment, poverty, and financial disparities, and emphasized that until those are being addressed, the scourge of GBVF will continue. On Friday, a meeting is expected to take place where discussions on a detailed plan will be highlighted, as well as the role of civil society and NGOs, among others. I'm Refilwe Mekwa in Johannesburg.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The Upside, taking the African perspective to fresh levels.
Million ways them flee when them buck up in a torture. Cause them I get torture.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to The Upside.
Yeah.
More fire.
All things that torture. That's the name of the album. You know, torture literally means that someone who bears a torch, like a torcher, like not T-U-R, but T-O-R-C-H-E-R. So like it's a Statue of Liberty holding a torch. Yeah. Like keeping it burning, you know what I'm saying? Like it just implies the fact that we have to inspire one another. We have to tell it through the music and reach out to the people to know that, listen, you got light inside of you that has to bend. You know what I'm saying? Like keep it burning. Like don't let nobody dim your shine.
The Upside. Live and real. It's dynamic. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kiev will continue working with the United States on an updated peace framework aimed at ending the war with Russia, but insists any compromise must strengthen, not weaken Ukraine. His comments come as U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators report meaningful progress in Geneva. Bunolo Maribe has more.
Speaking via video link to a parliamentary summit in Stockholm, Sweden, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that the country is entering a critical phase in its talks with the United States and European partners on a possible roadmap to end the nearly 4-year war with Russia.
Right now, we are at a critical moment, and we are working closely with the United States, with European partners, with many others to define steps that can end Russia's war against us, against Ukraine, and bring real security.
He stressed that Kiev is engaging with Washington on compromise positions, but also warned that no agreement can come at the expense of Ukraine's security or sovereignty.
Of course, we all continue working with partners, especially the United States, and look for compromises that strengthen but not weaken us. And we will continue explaining how dangerous it is to pretend that aggression is something one can simply overlook and move on.
Zelensky revealed that talks with the U.S. have kept sensitive issues on the table, including the release of all Ukrainian prisoners of war and the return of children taken to Russia during the conflict.
In the steps we have coordinated with the side of the U.S., we've managed to keep extremely sensitive points on the table, including the full release of all Ukrainian prisoners of war under the all for all formula, and civilians, and the complete return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. These are important steps, but to achieve real peace, more is needed.
He also urged European lawmakers to defend core principles, that borders cannot be redrawn by force, and that Russia must be held accountable, including thorough decisions on frozen Russian assets.
And it is crucial to support the principles on which Europe stands, that borders cannot be changed by force, that war criminals must not escape justice, and that the aggressor must pay fully for the war he started. And this is why decisions on Russian assets are essential.
Meanwhile, a 28-point proposal proposed by US President Donald Trump is under discussion. Though European partners express concerns, it may be too favorable to Moscow. Further negotiations are scheduled, potentially including a visit from Zelensky to Washington, as both sides seek to narrow gaps in the peace plan. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Well, this was Rise and Shine, because we're saying good morning, goodbye now, and not good morning. It's the end of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. Right now, though, it's time for the news with Joanane Tulongwepe, followed by the headlines in sports with Fikile Lingwati. Have an awesome day.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Top stories this hour. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces announced a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire, and South Africa observes 16 days of activism against GBV. Good morning. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have announced a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire with the Sudanese army. It comes a day after the army dismissed a truce proposal from international mediators, saying it favoured the RSF. Mediators have denied the accusations and said the proposed plan aims to stop the war. Sudan has plunged into famine, with tens of thousands of civilians killed since the civil war broke out in April 2023. A surge in militant attacks